This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Good afternoon on this cold, rainy afternoon. I'm Mary Bullock, visiting professor in history and political science, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this really interesting program this afternoon and to give Minister Xie a hearty welcome from the Emory community. He left Washington in the snow to arrive here to the cold rain. So I'm afraid we're not offering you a sunny Atlanta weekend, but we're delighted that you've come in a busy schedule, a busy week, to spend this time with us. At a time when U.S.-China relations are in the news, we are especially fortunate to have a senior specialist on U.S.-China relations here with us this afternoon. Minister Xie is the Minister and Deputy Chief of Mission of the Chinese Embassy in Washington, D.C. And as we learned at lunch today, this is actually his second tour in the embassy. He was also here during the early George W. Bush years, where he had, I think, might have been one of the most difficult jobs. He was the liaison with the U.S. Congress and later spokesman for the Chinese Embassy. He also was an Eisenhower Fellow, so I guess that brought you here at an even earlier time. In China, when he finished his tour here, he served in senior positions in the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, most recently as Deputy Director General of the Department of North American and Oceanic Affairs. Minister Xie graduated from Beijing Foreign Affairs University, and I don't know how he had time to do this, but was recently awarded an MA in Public Affairs from People's University in Beijing. We are lucky to have him here this afternoon. His time is limited, so we will have to adjourn right at 3 o'clock. Minister Xie is going to open with some introductory remarks, and then we will open it up for questions. Please join me in welcoming Minister Xie Feng.
Well, thank you very much for your kind introduction. It gives me great pleasure to come to Emory. This is my first trip here, but this is not my first experience interacting with the students and faculty of Emory. When I was working in Beijing in 2005, I remember meeting with a group of American students who participated in the Envision program, who are having a study tour around China. And I was also asked to brief them about China U.S. relations. And the first American student who raised his hand to ask a question is an Emory student. And I promise it's really a very good question. So since then I have been cherishing this dream of coming to Emory by myself, to see with my own eyes the beautiful campus, the intelligent students. So now, with the storm behind me in Washington, D.C., I'm here. So it really gives me great pleasure. Well, I will be mainly talking about Sino-U.S. relations this afternoon. But before that, I think it would be helpful if I can say a few words about China. As you probably know, China is a country with a long history. We Chinese, boast of ourselves of 5,000 years of civilization. But our neighbor, the Indians, boast not the Iranians, Recently, I've heard that they are boasting of having 7,000 years of civilization. But I think it's agreeable, it's accepted, by all of us that China is a country with 5,000 years civilization, uninterrupted. So this is something unique, in human history. And secondly, I think whether you go to China by yourself or you read about China, the first impression is its big population. China now have 1.3 billion people. And you know that we have adopted a family planning policy in China, encouraging each couple to have one child. But even after this policy has been adopted, the newly born population of China every year amount to 13 million or 14 million. That is almost the whole population of Australia. So we are creating a population of Australia every year. Thirdly, people have been impressed by the rapid development of China during the past 30 years. Well, I also feel very proud of that. According to the estimate, during the past 30 years, the annual growth rate of China is above 9.3%. That is unprecedented in human history as well. But on the other hand, China is a country with uneven development. I have a few figures to share with you on that. China is now the third largest economy in the world. However, its per capita GDP is just $3,300, ranking after 100 in the world. And there's also the uneven development between different parts of China. The 11 coastal provinces like Shanghai, Guangzhou, these metropolitan cities, they account for less than 10% of the total area, but their GDP accounts for 58% of the country's total. The Midland takes about 24. The 12 provinces in the western part of China cover about 70% of the land. However, they only contribute 18% to China's GDP. Now in Beijing, in Shanghai, it's not difficult for you to find young professionals who are earning more than $30,000 US per year. Well, 30,000 US dollars may not be a large sum here in the States, but taking the low cost of living in China, that was enough to have a very decent and comfortable life. But at the same time, if you go to the hinterland of China, go to the western part of China, you can still find a family of 4 or 5 people living on a meager yearly income of less than $300 US. So this is really the drastic, contrast between different areas of China. And just now I was talking about the long history of China. But on the other hand, China is also a young, developing country. China overthrew the Qing dynasty in 1919. And at that time, we established the first democratic republic in Asia. And then the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949. Only 60 years have passed. And our reform and opening to the outside started in 1979 or the end of 1978. So, in fact, we have only, it has only been 30 years since we really have concentrated on economic, development, improving people's livelihood, and to ensure social and progress. So this is the circumstances, under which China is now operating. And that is to say, China, on the one hand, we have made great achievement and progress. and there's very good prospect for further progress. But on the other hand, China is still a developing country, or on the whole, I mean, whether you call it underdeveloped or not, you know. So there is still a daunting task facing the government, the people. And that is why the policy of the Chinese government is to continue concentrating on economic development so that the living standards of the people can be further improved and comprehensive or overall development will be achieved, you know, nationwide. And in order to achieve that, I think two things are of absolute necessity. One is a stable domestic situation. No turmoil like in the Cultural Revolution era. No civil wars as in the in the Chiang Kai-shek nationalist government's era. The other thing is a peaceful international environment, so that we can contribute and also benefit from the friendly, mutually beneficial exchanges and cooperation with the outside world. And these two, if to be attained or achieved, we have to adopt a peaceful foreign policy. To put it simply, we want to make friends with all countries and enemy to none. And among all the countries, United States as the only superpower is the least that China would like to see as an enemy, but rather we would like to have United States as our long-term partner. Well, since President Nixon's historic visit to China in 1972, China U.S. relations have made great progress. The state of Georgia, where President Carter came from, contributed to the normalization of diplomatic relations between China and the United States. And during these 30 years, since 1979, though we have also met with difficulties, have twists and turns, but on the whole, this relationship has been moving upward. I can just give you one example. When President Nixon visited China in 1972, Chinese commodities are not allowed to be imported, into the United States. And the U.S. government, allowed U.S. citizens to import, I think, $50 worth of Chinese produce after President Nixon's historic visit, as a sort of a tangible achievement of our bilateral relations. But now our bilateral trade has come to such a level that we are interdependent upon each other. The trade number for 2008, according to our modest estimate, is 330 billion US dollars. It's about 126 times larger than 1979. From 1949 to 1972, almost no exchanges between China and the United States. But now, every day, we have around 5,000 people crossing the Pacific. So I think we do have reason, to feel very proud of the progress in Sino-US relations during the past 30 years. We're also very glad to see that with the incoming of the Obama administration, Sino-US relations have been witnessing a smooth transition and also a very good start. This is unprecedented in Sino-US relation, Almost every time when there is a change of government in United States, there is a debate on how US-China policy should be formulated, how China should be viewed. We still remember President Clinton, criticizing President Bush 41 for kowtowing to China. We still remember Bush 42 calling China a strategic rival during the campaign. But this is no longer the case during the campaign the year before last. So looking back, 2009, according to the Chinese lunar calendar, is the year of cow. And the year of cow, gives people the according to Chinese, it's a year of hard working and also a year of achievement. I think this also applied to Sino-US relations. We have seen, the frequent exchanges and communication between the leadership between our two countries. Our two presidents met 3 times last year, and President Obama visited China in the first year of his presidency. I think the two leaders reached very important consensus on building a cooperative, positive, and comprehensive bilateral relations. And also, we are determined to work to build a partnership to deal with the common challenges we are facing. I think this is not easily attainable. The right, positive, and appropriate characterization of this relationship not only save us the trouble of going over or again, with each coming of the new administration, but also set, I think, a positive basic tone for the development of this relationship with the new administration. So this is, I think, a very important aspect of the progress. Secondly, I think the dialogue at different levels between our two countries have been strengthened, especially the strategic and economic dialogue, which was held in Washington, D.C. last July. During the Bush administration, we have 2 separate dialogue. One is strategic economic dialogue with Secretary Paulson on the U.S. side and Madame Wu on the Chinese side. Then we have, on the political side, according to the U.S. terminology. It's senior level dialogue, while we Chinese call them strategic dialogue. The difference when we asked our American friends, they explained that because China is not U.S. ally, so they will not turn this dialogue into strategic dialogue, but rather would call that a senior level dialogue. But this time with the new administration, they said we will emphatically call this one a strategic dialogue. And we are also going to elevate the level of dialogue. In the Bush administration, we have the Deputy Secretary of State, first Mr. Zolik, then Mr. Negroponte, on the U.S. side, and then Dai Bingguo, who was then the Deputy Foreign Minister. But this time, you have Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Dai Bingguo, now the State Counselor, who is the direct boss of the Chinese Foreign Minister. I think this mechanism, if we make full use of it, can prove to be a very effective channel for you to talk about the issues, outstanding issues in our bilateral relations, to explore possible new areas of cooperation, and finally to deepen the mutual trust. So I have great, expectation of this dialogue. And thirdly, I think China and the United States have had very effective cooperation in dealing with the financial crisis, in picking up the economy of our respective countries, and also to contribute to the gradual recovery of world economy. We not only, I still remember in October 2008, when the financial crisis, broke out, Hu Jintao, the Chinese president, was probably the first foreign head of state to be called by your President Bush, soliciting his view on whether it would be feasible to hold a G20 summit. And I think Hu Jintao is definitely the first foreign head of state to give a affirmative answer. And he himself came here to attend both the Washington G20 as well as the Pittsburgh G20. Fourthly, I think China and the United States have had very effective consultation, coordination, as well as cooperation on those important global and regional issues, like the climate change, North Korean nuclear issue, Iranian nuclear issue, and so on and so forth. So the strategic dimension, or the international dimension of our bilateral relations have been fully manifested. So I will just stop here for these positive developments, because though I'm a diplomat, but I think it's not the diplomats also have to express himself in a frank and true to fact way. Sino-U.S. relations also are facing challenges as well, and you are all students on international relations or international politics. You have been following the development of this relationship. And so far as challenges are concerned, I think they are mainly from these aspects. One is the Taiwan issue. and especially the arms sale, to Taiwan. We have between us 3 joint communiques, namely the Shanghai Communique, the communique on the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the United States in 1979, as well as the August 17th communique. The August 17th communique deals specifically with the U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. And if I remember correctly, in that communique, the U.S. side committed itself that it will not pursue a long-term policy of arms sales to Taiwan, that its arms sales to Taiwan qualitatively and quantitatively will not exceed the level after the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and the United States, and that it will gradually reduce its arms sales to Taiwan, leading over a time to its final solution. Well, you can take out the communique, and to check whether I think more or less the same. the wording is more or less the same. So we, on our side, of course, are expecting the U.S. side to gradually decrease its arms sales to Taiwan, and over a period of time, leading to the final solution, that is the stop of arms sales to Taiwan. But this new announcement of arms sale package to Taiwan by the Obama administration come at a time when the cross-strait relations between the mainland and Taiwan are improving. We have been witnessing more people exchanges, the reducing tension, and there's also the possibility of 2 sides going into serious discussions about the reducing of military tension and building political confidence. And it also came at a time when China U.S. relations is moving in a positive manner. Our common interest has been increased. Our cooperation has been strengthened. And we are expecting further development of this relationship. So this really, puts the Chinese government, Chinese general public, in a very perplexed manner. And they are asking why the United States is announcing this arms sale package, and what is the intention, Are the is the U.S. government supportive of the improvement of relations along the Taiwan Straits? Is the United States government really, view China as a partner? So this is, I think, a outstanding issue that needs proper settlement. Secondly, I think it's problems related to Tibet, or the possible Dalai Lama visit, to the United States, and a possible meeting between your leaders with Dalai Lama. The Western people have a sort of very romantic, vision of Tibet in the form of Shangri-La. But if you really, spend some time, reading the history of Tibet, you will come to realize that Tibet before 1950s is not a Shangri-La. In fact, it's a a slave system which is operating at that time. And the Dalai Lama is the biggest slave owner. At that time, the life expectancy of the Tibetans are only 36 years. Illiteracy, percentage of the Tibetan population was 98%. The 5%, upper class in Tibet at that time owns 95% of the property, and wealth of Tibet at that time. We had the democratic reform, in Tibet in the 1950s, and now, more than 50 years later, the life expectancy of the Tibetans come to 8 years, and the population of the population of Tibetans have increased from 1.80 million to now 26 million, roughly. About this size. I think our policies towards Dalai Lama is fairly flexible. We have had altogether 8 rounds of contact with the representative of Dalai Lama. The recent one was just a week ago. The reason for the lack of progress in the contact between the central government and Dalai Lama's representative is because, up to now, if you look up in the so-called constitution, of Dalai Lama's government in exile in India, they are still calling for the independence of Tibet. In the 8th round, which happened last year, they presented a memorandum to the central government asking for the establishment of a so-called bigger Tibet region, which covers about 1/4 of the Chinese territory, asking for the expelling of Han as well as other ethnic people from this area. So, though Dalai Lama now is not openly asking for independence of Tibet, but if you look at these facts, I think the conclusion will be that he is moving towards sort of independence in disguise, or quasi independence, which will lead over time to complete independence of Tibet. Of course, this is not accepted by the central government, by the people in Tibet, as well as people in China on the whole. So Dalai Lama now, is visiting different parts of the world, trying to drag foreign countries in a line behind him, exerting pressure, to the Chinese government, defaming the Chinese government on its Tibetan policy, creating, difficulties for China's relations with other countries. So that is why we hope that the foreign countries' leaders will take a cautious approach on dealing with this very sensitive issue. Well, thirdly, I think it's the trade between our two countries. Well, in 2010, will still be a difficult year, not only for United States, but also for China and the rest of the world. You are probably aware that there are a large floating population in Chinese big cities. They are mainly, peasants or farmers who, go to big cities seeking temporary jobs and then settle down. But because of the financial crisis and economic difficulties, I think starting from last year, more than 24 million of them went back to their home village for the Spring Festival, but they did not come back because they have lost their jobs. Every year we have more than 6 million students graduating from universities and colleges. So the government have to provide jobs. So it's not only President Obama who is facing with the very difficult job of creating jobs, but it's also President Hu Jintao and the Chinese leadership. And I remember Hu Jintao once told President Obama that China's economy has to, maintain a annual growth rate of more than 8%. In order to barely cope with this demand on job creation. So the situation will be difficult. But I think that China, United States, and the rest of the world now are on the same boat because of the globalization of the world economy. This is not a time for us to accuse the other side, to put the blame on the other side, least alone to adopt protectionist measures against the other side, or to politicize, economic issues. Because this, on one hand, the gain will be temporary, but the loss will be mutual and long-term. So we appreciate very much, Secretary Hillary Clinton, during her first Asian policy speech, quoting the Chinese proverb, 同舟共济, rolling the boat in the same direction, in the same boat. So we hope that, our two sides will cooperate with each other, refrain from taking those protectionist, measures, to tide over the temporary difficulties together as partners. Well, after these three aspects, people seem to be very solemn. But I'm still quite optimistic about the long-term development of this relationship. Yesterday morning, I went to the Dallas airport, to say goodbye to the two Chinese pandas while going back to Chengdu. I was really impressed by the love, of American people on all walks of life, on Taishan and Meilan. The National Zoo of Washington, D.C., had held a farewell party for Taishan on the 30th of January. It was a Saturday, and it was snowing again. Also a snowy day. I don't know why. I mean, we have seen so much snow, during the past year, and as well as the beginning of this year. Hundreds and thousands of people, went to the National Zoo, despite the heavy snow, to say goodbye. And an American young man knelt down before Taishan to asking for asking his girlfriend to agree to marry him. So I think that the Taishan and Meilan, they are not only the crystallization of the cooperation between our two countries on giant panda preservation, but also have become a very special bondage between our two countries, and also a symbol of friendship between our two sides. I think on the long run, it's this people-to-people exchanges, people-to-people friendship that really will determine the future of Sino-U.S. relations. We are very glad to see that the U.S. Government have come up with a very ambitious plan, that is to increase your number of students studying in China in 4 years' time, to increase the number to 100,000, increasing by 25,000 every year. I think this is really a very good plan with foresight. And I hope that the Emory University will also play a leading role in that regard. So I will just stop here, and I'm looking forward to Q&A exchanges with you. Thank you.
We have, I think, about 15 minutes for questions. I want to... This is the roving mic, which I will turn back over to Evan. If you could raise your hand, and when I call on you, if you could say your name. And also, this is, if the mic is working fine, but speak clearly so we can all hear the question. And since time is limited, please make a short, quick question so we can have a lot of discussion here. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Deputy Chief Shi. My name is Chief Shi, and I'm a senior here at the college. As a college student, the internet is a very important resource for me, and I recently learned that China has blocked websites such as CNN and Facebook and Google. And I was just wondering, what is your opinion on this kind of censorship and censorship in general by the Chinese government?
Well, I think this website, free access.
Can you hear in the back row? Is the mic on? You can't hear.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay.
Has also become a controversial issue, on the media. Well, as a government official, I can say that the Chinese government, supports the development of internet. In China, though we are still a developing country, we are now having 330 million netizens. I think that is even larger than the U.S. whole population. So this, is an example to show that the government policy, as well as the Chinese people's free access, to internet. This is one. Secondly, I think it's also, I will not, rule out deny the fact that China and the rest of the world, have different national, circumstances. And the internet, you also have to, manage that in a way that conforms with your culture, history, and above all with your legal system. So in that way, I think there may be some slight differences, between China and the rest of the world and the United States. Though, thirdly, I would say that the Chinese government encourages, foreign companies, including, the Google and other, big conglomerates, to continue operating in China. But of course, within the realm of Chinese, Chinese stipulation and system of law. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Hao Zhiqian. Actually, I drove an hour and a half from Athens. I'm from University of Georgia.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I promise you, usually Georgia is a lot warmer than this. My question is, the relationship between China and U.S. Are largely depend on different levels. Education is definitely one of them. And upon graduation, lots of the graduates are expecting going back to China to develop, to have their career. But with the real estate industry in Beijing and Shanghai going ridiculous or even crazy, what's the Chinese policy, or what's the policy from Chinese government to stabilize the real estate industry or help the students or newly scholars to have a home in those big cities and begin their career? Thank you.
Well, I've also been impressed by the skyrocketing of real estate pricing in China, especially in those big cities. My wife bought an apartment in 2004. At that time, the per square meter price is 9,000 RMB. And the week before last, when I went back to Beijing to attend a conference, and I found that the real estate agency have similar apartments on their advertisement. The price has tripled. So on the one hand, I'm very glad, my wife made a good investment. But on the other hand, you cannot expect all Chinese, to buy apartments with that high price. I think the government is now come to realize the necessity of government taking measures to deal with this. But on the other hand, the government is still keeping a sober mind. That is, now we are now doing the sort of planned, market economy, socialist market economy. We don't want to go back to the time when the government, will manipulate the price of, real estate. In the final analysis, we still have to depend on the market to determine. I think the bubble in the Chinese real estates do exist, but it's not as big as seen by outsiders with first glance. We have to recognize, there's a great demand for real estate in China. as I said, 1.3 billion people. Now about more than 70% are still farmers. And China, have about 20% of the world population, but we only have about 7% of the world plowable land. So it's impossible to imagine that all these 700 million farmers to stay in rural areas. So that is why the government is now encouraging the urbanization, encourage farmers, to leave the farmland and to move to the cities to find job. And with this inflow of floating population, there is an increasing demand of houses. But, we think that the real estate should also be developed in a way that will not only, cater for the needs of the upper class, like foreign investors, foreign businessmen. When they go to Shanghai, when they go to Beijing, they would like to buy high, luxurious, apartments or even houses. Aside from that, the government should do something, even with policy encouragement as well as with financial subsidiary, for those so-called, those apartments which are for, underpaid people, to at least to have an apartment of their own. So there, I am expecting there will be some adjustment, in the prices of real estate in China. But so long as this demand exists, the real estate price on the whole, instead of going down, I think they were still going up. Personally, I hope that they will, go up in a gradual way, in conformity or in balance with the overall, growth of the economy and with the rise of the people's income, so that people, at least they will have somewhere to live. This is very important.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the, some very insightful comments. My question is more geared towards long-term growth of China, and I'm interested to know, despite the current economic scenario, and you've identified growing jobs and creating jobs as an important challenge that China is dealing with. What do you see some of those social and economic challenges in long term? China is amazing, doing really, really well economically, but to sustain the growth, what are some of the impediments that you see are important for Chinese government, and what are they doing in terms of reforms or other solutions to that? I would appreciate your comments on that. Thank you.
There are a lot more, aside from the job creation. And if I have time, I can continue talking, on and on. I just list a few others, One is I think there's the need to reform the taxation system in China because of the growing gap between the rich and poor. Then we also have, there's the need to establish comprehensive Medicare system. Now in big cities, in government employees like me, there's no problem at all. But for farmers, 70% of population, they do not have Medicare. I think this is something the government should look into. Then the Social Security, this is, the same story,
I know know there are a number of questions, but we are going to have to adjourn. Because Minister Xie must go on to several more meetings this afternoon. I want to thank the National Association of Chinese Americans for bringing you to Atlanta. And I want to thank the Halle Institute and the Confucius Institute of Atlanta and the Carter Center's China program for sponsoring this lecture this afternoon. But I also want to especially thank you for coming and saying you gave the example of the pandas as being goodwill ambassadors for China and the United States, or for China. I want to say that you are a far more articulate ambassador for U.S.-China relations than even the pandas.
Not as effective as a panda.
So thank you very much.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.